Cultivating the Buddhist Heart: How to Find Peace and Fulfillment in a Changing World by Nichiko Niwano. Chapter 3: Salvation Through Buddhism. For true salvation, what is the essence of faith? If we can properly recognize this, all our anxieties, all our suffering will disappear. Our lives are full of suffering and pain, as well as joy and pleasure. All of us suffer setbacks of one kind or another. It is natural to wish for succor when we experience conflict with people around us or when we are ill. Many people turn to God and the Buddha for help. In fact, people generally turn to religion in the hope that faith will rescue them from the suffering of this world. It is only human to want to be saved, so there is no need to deny this wish. Wanting to be happy may seem selfish, but the desire for individual happiness at its root is linked to the broader wish for the happiness of all humankind. For those of religious faith, succor and peace are to be found in worshiping or taking refuge in the focus of their devotion. When suffering seems unbearable, appealing to God and the Buddha alleviates our pain. With the focus of devotion before us, it is a little easier to realize that we have not been as considerate of others as we could be, that we have not tried hard enough, that perhaps we have complained too much. Our interest shifts from material desires to the wish to live as God and the Buddha would have us live. Since human existence is often self-centered, people usually turn to religion when a problem is too hard to resolve by oneself. I can't solve this, one thinks, yet the desire to do something about it is strong. It is at those times that we turn to the faith we have so long ignored. Suddenly, we see that we are enabled to live through the good graces of others, and our life changes from being self-centered to being dedicated to serving others. We turn to religion in the hope that it will save us from financial reverses, to cure our illnesses, mend our relationships, and fulfill our everyday wishes. But religion is more than just a shelter for those in trouble. Even the happiest person, with a close and caring family and wanting for nothing, can turn to religious faith in the search for a life of true value. Shakyamuni sought the salvation of all people. He left a life of affluence in the quest for a meaningful existence. That is what religion, or faith, is really all about. In his Risshō and Kokuron, treatise on establishment of the true Dharma and the peace of the nation, Nichiren warned against turning to religion only to serve one's immediate wants, to become rich, to be cured of an illness, to bring peace to a family in turmoil, to resolve fears for the future. Rather, he said, one should take refuge in the one virtue of the true vehicle, which means to give oneself totally to the Lotus Sutra, the foremost of the Buddha's teachings. We have so many wants and desires, and are quick to ask for this and that. What we really need to do is discard this small and narrow faith in order to establish a firm faith in the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's law. That is what Nichiren was talking about, and what he meant was to live in accordance with the truth and the Dharma that Shakyamuni discovered through his enlightenment. To abide by the Buddha's teachings is to willingly give oneself up to a force that transcends the individual self. True salvation can be attained only through true faith. The Risshō Kōsei Kai member's vow refers to this in the words, "We recognize in Buddhism a true way of salvation." The first step to this recognition is to discard a faith that is founded only on personal wants and return to the essence of Buddhism. Buddhist awareness. What is true salvation? To know true salvation is to understand the concept of the one great cause of the Buddha's appearance in this world, and open one's eyes to the Buddha knowledge as explained in Chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra, Tactfulness, which states, "Why do I say that the Buddhas, the world-honored ones, only on account of the one very great cause appear in this world? Because the Buddhas, the world-honored ones, desire to cause all living beings to open their eyes to the Buddha knowledge, so that they may gain the pure mind." The one very great cause refers to the Buddha's one great reason, the most important reason, for appearing. The passage goes on to refer to the Buddha's desire to show all living beings the Buddha knowledge, to cause them to apprehend the Buddha knowledge, and to cause them to enter the way of the Buddha knowledge. The Buddha's one great reason, however, can be summarized as the opening of one's eyes to the Buddha knowledge, or the Buddha's wisdom. The Buddhas came into this world in order to open our eyes to the Buddha knowledge. The most important thing for us is to achieve this Buddhist awareness. The phrase, open their eyes, suggests that the Buddha knowledge is something we already have, but are unaware of. To put it another way, everyone has the Buddha knowledge. Another phrase that appears in the Tactfulness chapter is, the true aspect of all things. To have the Buddha knowledge, or the Buddha's wisdom, is to be able to see the real aspect of all things. What is the reality of the world, of human existence, as seen through the Buddha knowledge? In the eyes of the Buddha knowledge, nothing is ever the same. Everything is undergoing constant change. As we know, this is the law of transience. To open our eyes to the Buddha knowledge within ourselves is to understand the law of transience. When we look at the world with the Buddha knowledge, we see that nothing exists in and of itself. Instead, everything is dependent on everything else. We coexist in a relationship of mutual support and dependence. Each part of the whole is thus linked with the other parts in one great life. This interdependence can be described as the state of non-self. Transience and non-self are the true aspect of the world. To attain Buddhist awareness is to become aware of these truths, particularly the truth of transience. How to see. The essence of Buddhism is to see the world as it really is. Very often, we become so mired in our worries and pain that we fail to see the reality before us. We would not suffer nearly so much if we would only look at what is really there. It is not easy to see with Buddhist awareness. Sometimes we think we are seeing the whole when we are actually only seeing a part. We cannot see things correctly when we are looking through self-centered eyes. What, then, is the right way to look at things? The first step is to observe calmly and objectively, to look from all sides so that we can see the whole. The next step is to go beyond appearances, to perceive the reality within. We all have the Buddha knowledge within us. All we need to do is observe without prejudice. We need to see how things change, how everything is interconnected. We will then be able to see clearly that we ourselves, those around us, and in fact all things, are undergoing constant change. We will see suffering become happiness, conflict become harmony. We will also see that everything is given life by everything else, that nothing exists without being dependent upon something else. Finally, having seen that all is transient and interdependent, we need only to accept this reality as it is. Right view is given as the first part of the Eightfold Path. To have right view is to see things correctly, and that is to recognize the truth in the Dharma, the law of transience. Buddhism begins with seeing things as they are. We must look fully on the pain, joy, pleasure, and sorrow of our daily lives, and look, too, at nature as it is. The sun rises and sets, flowers bloom and fade. To see is the starting point of the awareness of transience, and from seeing only the superficial, we advance to seeing the inner being. Life becomes continuous suffering only when we view things through fixed, preconceived ideas, denying the constant change that is really there, and believing that we alone are right. To recognize the law of transience is to see with the Buddha knowledge, which is to see things as they truly are. That is the way to resolve our troubles and find true salvation. Overcoming poverty, illness, and conflict. If we do not know the law of transience and are not aware of the preciousness and wonder of life, there is no true salvation. During Risshō Kōsei Kai's first 20 years, Japan was struggling to recover from its defeat in World War II. People wanted more than anything else to be relieved from poverty and illness, and from disharmony and conflict within the family. Religious faith offered hope, and Risshō Kōsei Kai worked to offer salvation from poverty, illness, and conflict through the Buddha's teachings. Many people did find relief from such travails in the Lotus Sutra. Now, however, it is time to stop and reconsider. Have we found true happiness? Have we achieved true salvation? Recognizing the truth in the Dharma can relieve our suffering. This means acknowledging that all is transient and awakening to the wonder and value of life. True salvation cannot be attained without an awareness of the truth in the Dharma and the preciousness of life. Poverty and wealth are relative concepts. We judge whether we are poor or rich by comparing ourselves with our neighbors. Such comparisons become meaningless, however, when we recognize the truth and the Dharma and the value of our lives. Recognize the dignity and absolute value of your own existence, and you will realize that there can be no comparison with others. You will become sincerely grateful simply to be alive, and poverty will no longer be an issue. Illness is difficult to deal with. It can be cruel and debilitating, but illness also opens your eyes to the value of your life. When you are sick, you suddenly realize what is most important in life. Of course, nothing is better than good health. Yet many people, when they fall ill, rediscover the Buddha's compassion and are grateful for it. You can empathize with those who are ill when you have been sick yourself. You know their pain and can share their suffering. When you are in a hospital bed, you become aware of the warmth and caring of family and friends. You awaken to the emotions and thoughts of the doctors and nurses upon whom you depend. You recognize that to fall ill is to know the Buddha's compassion. Conflict with those around you or within your own family arises because you lose sight of the preciousness of one another's existence. Conflict is the clashing of egos that deny the human dignity of others. You cannot see the dignity of other lives when you fail to recognize the preciousness of your own life. Know that your own life is precious, and you will realize that others are equally precious. Not simply other people, but all life. Conflict becomes impossible. Where conflict exists, joy vanishes. Deep down, we all want to have friendly relations with everyone else. In today's world, having a certain amount of money is essential. We have to eat, we need clothing. Sad to say, our excessive desire for these essentials of life is a source of suffering. Salvation comes through realizing that all is transient, that all life is precious. With this awareness, we can gain the wisdom and strength to overcome any kind of suffering, including poverty, illness, and conflict. Steep yourself in suffering. Asked, how can I be saved from suffering? The Chinese Zen priest Chao Tsung Shen is said to have replied, you must suffer as long as you live. At the core of this seemingly cruel response is reassurance, for Chao is telling us, I will suffer with you to the bitter end. We all want to be more flexible and adaptable, but we tend to insist on having our own way, becoming inflexible. When our lives are stable and uneventful, we seldom feel the need to reflect on ourselves, much less change our ways. Suffering offers the chance for major change. Chau's admonishment to continue suffering is meant to open our eyes to the opportunity that suffering gives us to know the truth and the Dharma and to change the very essence of our being. At the same time, he is teaching us how important it is to know what it means to overcome suffering. I believe there is a clue here as to how to best deal with the pain of poverty, illness, and conflict. We may not find instant relief from our suffering, but those who awaken to the preciousness of life are able to accept all further suffering with sincere thanksgiving. We learn to look on the bright side. For example, the impoverished may bemoan the cost of feeding the family, but at the same time find renewed energy to work hard precisely because there is a family, a precious family, to support. Of all human endeavors, recognizing the preciousness of life is the most important. Our goal is not to rid ourselves of suffering as experienced through poverty, illness, and conflict, but to take advantage of the opportunity suffering gives us to begin a life of faith founded upon the Buddha Dharma. We can overcome any kind of suffering once we recognize the truth and the Dharma to which Shakyamuni was enlightened, and awaken to the dignity of all life. True salvation is achieved when each individual awakens to the law of transience, recognizes the preciousness of his or her life, and learns to respect the dignity of all life. Two types of people. There seem to be two types of people: the unhappy person living in the midst of happiness, and the happy person living in the midst of unhappiness. The former is the type who has no wants and yet grumbles about what he or she perceives to be lacking in life. On the surface, this kind of person seems to have everything anyone could ever want, but inside, he or she is unhappy, seeing only the negative side of things. The latter type of person is burdened by great unhappiness, and yet is able to seek out the small pleasures of life. Life is full of suffering, but those who can find pleasure in the little things of life will find the shortcut to true happiness. Superficial trappings do not determine a person's happiness. The person who can give thanks in the midst of trials and tribulations is the truly happy person. In contrast, the person who gives no thanks is truly unhappy, no matter how wealthy he or she may be. Happiness depends on the way we look at things. Japanese people today have a rich material life, but they have lost the sense of thanksgiving that is essential to attaining true happiness. In the Dhammapada, Shakyamuni says, "There is no greater happiness than to be free of sickness. There is no greater treasure than to know sufficiency." No matter how wealthy we may be, if we are not satisfied, we will want more and more and will know no peace. That is why the greatest treasure is to be satisfied with what we already have. Live each day in thanksgiving, and you will be able to tackle life with initiative and a positive attitude. Live each day with dissatisfaction, and you will become passive and negative. Each of us has been given a uniquely valuable life. Let us live not in gloomy dissatisfaction, but in glorious thanksgiving. The causes of suffering: greed, anger, and ignorance. If we are ruled by greed, anger, and ignorance, we cannot see the preciousness of life. For the individual to live, those around him or her to live, and for society to live, this is the way to make the most of precious life, to experience joy, and to fulfill the Buddha's prayer. Who does not want to live in complete freedom? I believe attaining this deep-seated wish is the key to happiness. How often have we been convinced we are right? How often have we insisted this or that should be exactly thus and so? Usually this happens when we are in conflict with someone and are full of anger. Greed and anger drive us to think and act foolishly. Nothing could be further from true freedom. Buddhism calls greed, anger, and ignorance the three poisons. They represent the defilements that curtail our freedom. Greed involves always wanting more, never being satisfied. Desire is a natural part of all life, but it becomes a hindrance when carried to the extreme of wanting everything for oneself. It is not limited to the desire for things. The self-centered desire to control people is also a form of greed. Buddhism describes such people as hungry spirits who dwell in one of the 6 realms of transmigration, always hungry, never satisfied. There is no limit to human greed, and so we become like starving devils. Anger is born of displeasure and breeds conflict and disharmony. The angry person is like a soul plunged into hell, a place of endless suffering. When we are overtaken by anger, we lose sight of everything else. We find ourselves alone, convinced we are surrounded by enemies, even though human life is premised on interaction with others. The suffering we undergo in this state of mind is like being in hell itself. Ignorance is the state of being blind to the truth and the Dharma. Because we fail to understand the law of transience, we confront everything impulsively, which only deepens our pain and suffering. The person who acts in this way has lost the capacity for human reason and is like an animal. Suppose 2 people must share 2 rice balls, one big and the other small. Greed is wanting to have the big rice ball. When one of the 2 people reaches for the big rice ball, the other person is angered. The person of conscience has self-control and is satisfied to make do with the small rice ball. The ignorant person, however, cannot give up on having the big rice ball, and tries to take it away from the second person. This results in conflict, and later a sense of shame arises. We create our own pain, just as we create our own joy and happiness. Be the first to reach for the small rice ball. This will please the other person, who later will be equally willing to give away. Be thankful for desire. If we look back on our lives, we are sure to be dismayed by how foolish we have been. Yet our earthly desires, as represented by greed, anger, and ignorance, are an integral part of our lives. We want to eat, sleep, work, live a happy life, and be recognized by others. These desires are what keep us alive. We should not trouble other people, but ultimately, we are beings that always trouble someone, simply by our own existence. It is the pain we feel at causing trouble to others that forces us to look at ourselves with remorse. Remorse exposes our foolishness, and recognizing this foolishness is a step in our spiritual growth. Recognizing our own foolishness is of great importance. It is often assumed that Buddhism denies all desire, but that is not so. Wanting to work hard to keep our families comfortable is one kind of desire. Our endeavors to fulfill this desire have a positive effect on society. So, in that sense, desire is an important driving force in the world. Were we to lack all desire, we would never feel compelled to work for others. Life would become meaningless. The Zen master Dogen said that the life and death of this world represent the life of the Buddha. So our desires, our wants and illusions, are part of the life of the Buddha. We seek the enlightenment of the Buddha in order to cope with our desires. Both greed and our attempts to grapple with greed are an integral part of the Buddha's life and give meaning to our lives. It behooves us then to concentrate on the here and now, to throw ourselves wholeheartedly into the task at hand. Our motivation may be a little self-centered, but our dedication drives things forward, and that eventually ties into giving to others. Our desires must be controlled. It is dangerous to pursue them without regard for the way they may affect others. To live is the most important thing, but happiness cannot be attained by concentrating on one's own life alone. Human joy, and the Buddha's prayer, is that we live, those around us live, and all of society lives. The fountain of wealth within oneself. In the midst of suffering, our overwhelming desire is for relief. More than anything else, we want to be free of pain and anguish. If only we could live without any pain, we think. But if we shift our perspective, we see that in living through the suffering we undergo as a result of greed, anger, and ignorance, we experience spiritual growth. People all around us have discovered, through suffering, the three poisons in themselves, and begun to live lives grounded in the truth and the Dharma. These people have not been overcome by their troubles. In fact, they are grateful for their burdens that have been placed on them. It is because I suffered so, they say, that I am what I am today. Giving thanks for suffering may seem to run counter to all logic, but the Buddha's teachings make such gratitude possible by showing us the causes of our suffering and guiding us to look within ourselves. Perceived in this way, everything that happens to us is like a sermon from the Buddha. Life becomes full of joy, and we are saved. Consider the woman whose husband is living with another woman and has not come home for many years. Surely jealousy and anger will twist her heart. But the forsaken wife, who knows the Buddha's teachings, will accept even this as a gift from the Buddha. It is within us all to make a complete about-face and accept whatever may happen with calm thanksgiving. Anger only increases one's pain. Even as she suffers, the betrayed wife may realize that the source of her pain is her own unkindness to her husband. Realizing this, she is freed of pain and is able to wish in all sincerity for her husband's happiness. Suffering is part of the human condition. Many are the times we are overcome by defeat and failure. That is life. That is the world of transience. However great our pain, however humiliating our suffering and shame, we feel because we live. It is all too easy to separate things into good and bad. We cling to our illusions. But the only way to find true happiness and freedom is to recognize that everything is a gift from the Buddha. Our illusions and attachments blind us to the reality of the inner self. If we break through the illusions and attachments to dig deep into the inner self, we will discover a rich fountain of wisdom and compassion. This fountain will enrich our lives and make us free. It is the Buddha who first discovered this wonderful fountain and who teaches us now how to discover it for ourselves. Happiness can be achieved now. Shakyamuni teaches us that everyone has the ability to recognize the truth in the Dharma. We have the potential to attain the Buddha knowledge and open the eye of wisdom within ourselves. Yet, even though we should be able to overcome any kind of suffering, we usually balk when we are confronted by a serious problem, convinced that we will not be able to cope. If we recognize the truth and the Dharma revealed to us by Shakyamuni, we can resolve any difficulty. Every one of us has the ability, but it is up to each individual to strive to realize its potential. Since the ability to recognize the truth and the Dharma is innate, in a sense, we have already attained salvation. The problem is that we seldom realize this. Unaware that we are already saved, we complain. Why do I have to suffer so much? Why do I have so many troubles? The Buddha appeared in this world to save all humanity. That means salvation for you and for me. When we recognize and accept the law of transience, we learn what a blessing it is just to have been born. Suffering and pain arise from our ignorance of the law of transience. Upon awakening to this fact, our complaints are transformed into thanksgiving, and we are instantly saved. Everyone is saved. The difference lies only in whether or not we realize it. The Avatamsaka Sutra tells us that the wisdom of the Buddha is innate, not only in human beings, but in all living things. Only our attachments and illusions prevent us from seeing the wisdom that is within ourselves. If we rid ourselves of all attachments and illusions, we will at once discover the same wisdom as the Buddha. These are heartening words that should give us all courage. Salvation here and now. The famous 17th century poet Matsuo Basho wrote this haiku. The cicada sings, unaware that it is soon to die. Basho used the cicada as a metaphor for the brevity of human existence. It is generally assumed that if only we make the effort, we will someday find true happiness. But we need to find happiness right now. There is not enough time to prepare for the future. The world is changing every moment, so there is no knowing what will happen tomorrow, let alone next month or next year. No one knows what the future holds. That is why we need to find happiness here and now. The way to do that is to recognize the law of transience. Accept that all is constantly changing, and strive to live in a way that seems good to you and to others. You will then find that your worries vanish, and you can be truly happy. It is not necessary to strive for years and years. Happiness need not be a future reward, but can be a reality in the present. The Zen master Hakuin cites an experience similar to the one recorded by Basho. Hearing a cricket chirping under a rain-drenched rock, Hakuin suddenly recognized the truth of the Buddha's teachings, and his doubts about the Lotus Sutra were instantly erased. Recognize the law of transience, and your dissatisfaction with life will be transformed into joy and thanksgiving. You will find immediate happiness, and will be able to express sincere gratitude for even the worst trouble and suffering. You will be grateful for things as they are. Be grateful for everything. When we become aware of the preciousness of life and the wonder of having been born human, we can perceive our being alive and the most ordinary, everyday things as sermons of the Buddha. We should give thanks for the life we have received, for having been born as human beings, and for having encountered the teachings of the Buddha. There is much to be grateful for. If we realize this, we will be able to be thankful for everything. Religion teaches us how we should live. With all that has been bestowed upon us, it behooves us to live to the fullest. Too often, we seek quick relief in religion. Faith, we mistakenly assume, can make us rich or cure our illnesses. But it is in the ordinary things of everyday life that we will find the true blessings of our faith. Consider what a miracle it is just to be alive. How wonderful that is. Being able to give thanks for ordinary things helps us to accept things just as they are, even when we are suffering. The mere fact that we have life is enough to fill us with joy, and the lives of others are just as much a miracle as our own existence. We live and are sustained by others. The Buddha's teachings awaken us to the wonder and mystery of the here and now. Our happiness or unhappiness is determined by whether or not we have had the opportunity to become acquainted with the Buddha's teachings. Our recognition of the truth and the Dharma, or failure to do so, will determine whether we experience happiness or its opposite. We believe we are unhappy because we are poor or because we are ill, but happiness is not so simple a matter. The energy to live is generated by our encounter with the Buddha's teachings our acceptance of the truth in the Dharma, and our awakening to the wonder of life. Our faith teaches us that these are the sources of true happiness. No matter how affluent we may be, no matter how good our health, without knowledge of the truth in the Dharma, there can be no genuine happiness. The greatest joy is to be found in the Buddha's wisdom, in the Buddha knowledge that is inherent in us. The Buddha watches over us and protects us. Knowing this, we can be cheerful, grateful for the life we have received. That is the essence of salvation. Give thanks even for rain. We judge even the weather to be good or bad. It's a nice sunny day today, we say, or what fine weather we are having. It is true that our spirits rise when we look up at a bright blue sky. When it is raining, on the other hand, we feel depressed and complain about the bad weather. As the law of transience tells us, nothing in the world remains the same from one moment to the next. It is therefore only to be expected that the weather will also change. Cloudy one day, rainy the next, windy today, calm tomorrow. It is in the natural order of things for the weather to change. It makes no sense for human beings to decide that the weather is good or bad. When dry days persist during what is supposed to be the rainy season, water levels fall, the rice fields dry up, and water supplies may have to be rationed. Rain quenches our thirst, helps rice and vegetables to grow, and refreshes the earth on which we make our home. Of course, excessive rainfall or severe drought can cause great harm to both people and crops. We need to be prepared for such events, but at the same time, we need to learn to give thanks equally for both rain and clear skies. The sun, clouds, rain, and wind all contribute to our lives, and for that we should be grateful. Expressing our thanks is the way to lead lives filled with joy and pleasure. Live with joy. The ancient Zen master Kaiki was given that name because he found pleasure in everything. The Japanese word Kaiki means general pleasantness. When the weather was good, Kaiki gave thanks for being able to work outdoors. When it was rainy, he was grateful that he had time to read. Kaiki lived at a remote mountain temple. When a visitor came by, he was pleased to hear news of the outside world. When a day passed in silence, he rejoiced that he could meditate in peace. How wonderful is the ability to see the good side of everything. What a good way it is to live. Most of us resent people who drop by unannounced when we are busy. How much more would we be able to enjoy life if we could learn to be grateful for such precious encounters, whether or not they suit our convenience at a particular moment? Think about how wonderful it is to enjoy the food we eat, to be able to move our bodies as we wish, to enjoy conversations with others, and to sleep well at night. These minor, everyday pleasures bring joy to our lives. There is so much to be grateful for. Being able to watch our children grow up and mature, learning the lessons of our mistakes, enjoying a brief glimpse of a beautiful wildflower by the road, knowing we have a family that cares about us. The world around us is always changing. Therefore, every encounter is a new pleasure to savor. When we realize this, we can find a lasting happiness. If we want to be happy right now, we need only give thanks for everything in our lives. A simple change of perspective can leave us filled with joy. Happiness is possible in the here and now. A life of gratitude is a life that is worth living. A life in which salvation is attained. The Sublime Prayer. To wish for all humanity to attain true happiness and to live in accordance with that wish, this is a sublime prayer. In Chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra, Tactfulness, the Buddha says, "Of yore I made a vow, wishing to cause all creatures to rank equally without difference with me." The Buddha wants everyone to awaken to the truth in the Dharma, to become a Buddha like himself. He has vowed to do this and is determined to fulfill his vow. It happens that the Buddha's vow and humanity's most deep-seated desire are one and the same. How can that be, you ask? My personal wishes can't be anything like the sacred vow of the Buddha. The Buddha's vow is all-encompassing, while my own wishes are small and insignificant. We are attracted by the Buddha's vow, however, because it speaks to something that dwells deep in our hearts. The Buddha's prayer is everyone's prayer. Most of us want to live better than other people, to have more possessions than others. Of course, the desire for affluence is a selfish one. But even the most self-centered wish originates in a greater, universal desire that is also the source of the Buddha's vow to cause all creatures to rank equally without difference with me. The Buddhist believer makes 4 vows: to guide as many people as possible to enlightenment, to rid oneself of all defilements, to learn the Buddha Dharma, and to attain Buddhahood. Our goal is to practice the way of the Bodhisattva, one who strives for the salvation of others as well as oneself. In a secular world, we are always competing and comparing ourselves with others. Yet, even in the midst of this competition, we all share the desire to live in harmony and peace with other people. That is why it feels satisfying to be nice to someone, while we find such pleasure in helping others. Our desire to live in harmony with one another is the same as the Buddha's vow to bring happiness to all people. The Buddha's vow speaks to the core of our being, because it reflects a wish that is the essence of the human condition. To be able to reach beyond confrontation and conflict, to build a world of harmony, that is humanity's prayer. This original prayer can also be seen as our desire to rid ourselves of the preconceived image of an unchanging self in order to live in accordance with the changes of the world. In other words, to live in a condition of non-self. There is no need to lock oneself into a set pattern and declare, "This is the kind of person I am." The self is constantly evolving and changing and has infinite possibilities. This is the way we really are and really want to be. True salvation lies in the discovery of the genuine prayer that is already within us, for our ultimate desire is the same as the Buddha's. Discovering this desire leads us to true faith and to salvation. Discovering the genuine prayer within. Prayer is a term used by people everywhere, regardless of their religious faith. For Buddhists, prayer is the same as what is called a vow, and both are at the core of our being. As I have already said, deep down all of us want to be friends. All of us want to live in peace. This hope is rooted deep within us. It is our prayer and our wish, and we have it whether or not we are religious. Thus, there is no need to make a special wish or prayer. The wish, the prayer, is already there within us. All we need to do is make ourselves aware of it. Prayer is a personal thing, of course, which spontaneously wells up within us. It is generally assumed, therefore, that personal prayer does not really have the power to move others. But our prayers ultimately share in the Buddha's prayer and so, I believe, have the power to change the world. The Buddha dedicated his life to preaching the Dharma. He was energized to do so by wisdom and compassion, by his vow to awaken all people to the truth and the Dharma. Buddhism has passed down this vow through some 2,500 years to the present day. Wishing for the happiness of all. Perhaps the most important wish of humanity is that all people will attain true happiness. This is such a lofty goal that it can be called the sublime prayer. To put it simply, one cannot rejoice in one's own happiness if there is even one unhappy person nearby. This is a simple wish, a simple prayer that I believe everyone shares. Shakyamuni was enlightened to the fact that we suffer because we are self-centered in our perceptions. We complain that someone's words have hurt our feelings. We complain that we receive no thanks for doing a favor. We complain that our boss seems unaware of how hard we work. It is precisely these kinds of self-centered thoughts and feelings that disturb human harmony and create suffering. Discard your little self, get rid of your preconceived ideas, and you will see that everything in the world is constantly changing, that all things are the result of causes and conditions and are born and die, that everything is related, and that all things are one. Once we realize this, we cannot help feeling at one with others, and out of this arises the desire to help and serve others, a sense of caring and compassion. It is only natural to want to lead a joyful life. After all, each life is unique and precious. But to attain our own joy, we need to stop and carefully examine our innermost being. We think we will be satisfied if only our immediate worries are resolved, but that is not how things work. True satisfaction can be achieved only by conveying the teaching in which we put our faith to as many people as possible. Every religion, in other words, must disseminate its teachings. The Japanese poet and author of children's stories, Kenji Miyazawa, wrote, "There can be no individual happiness until the world as a whole is happy." Those words reflect the Buddha's vow, the sublime prayer. Shakyamuni's desire, his decree, is that each of us become the kind of caring person that Miyazawa had in mind. Living in simplicity. As people living in the world today, let us confirm together what is important, what is essential. The basis of a happy life will reveal itself. The book Inochi ni do Tabi, Journey to Life, by the educator Satoru Takeshita, includes a poem by the Christian pastor Susumu Kono, titled, Which? In Japan, just one bowl of rice seems like nothing. In India, just one bowl of rice is venerated. Which brings greater happiness? Japan is now so affluent that any food left over after we have eaten our fill is thrown away. We forget to be grateful for the food that sustains our lives and waste it without a thought. Far from giving thanks for the food, we complain about its quality. The poem mentions India, but I believe that is just a symbolic reference, representing any less economically developed nation where even one bowl of rice is precious and worth giving thanks for. How happy can someone really be in an affluent world so full of things? The person who can express sincere gratitude for one bowl of rice is really much happier than the person who is inundated by material wealth. Those of us who live in cities are especially likely to forget the blessings of nature, to forget that we are sustained by God and the Buddha. We become self-centered and are mistakenly convinced that we live by our own will. Before we realize it, we are leading wasteful lives. The era in which our goal was material affluence is past. Today, people are rethinking their values and searching for what will bring them true happiness and make life worthwhile. What is the purpose of human existence? What is the true nature of human beings? This kind of self-examination has always been an essential part of the human condition and will always be so. For a while, we forgot this. But today, much of the world is looking within in search of more substantive values. While succeeding to the presidency of Risshō Kōsei Kai in 1991, I have used the Japanese character's meaning simplicity for my first symbolic calligraphy of the new year. Each time I write these characters with my brush, I contemplate the meaning of Buddhism and pray that I, along with my fellow members of Risshō Kōsei Kai, will discover the true essence of our humanity. We worship the eternal Buddha Shakyamuni, but we do not pray for our personal wishes to be granted. Rather, the objective of our worship is to open the eyes of others, as well as our own, to the truth and the Dharma that Shakyamuni revealed to us. We strive to awaken to the preciousness of life, to emulate the Buddha by sharing in the suffering of others with compassion and caring, and thereby to give meaning to our own lives. My annual calligraphy is my prayer that one day all people will awaken to the true essence of our humanity and our faith. Living in simplicity. We live in an era of increasingly diverse values and lifestyles. It is indeed important to live in the way that best suits one's own character and interests. We do not need to copy others, but we must never stop asking ourselves what is most important. If we lose sight of the essentials of our humanity, we will end up leading selfish, meaningless lives. Our lives are rich in material things. In fact, we are too rich. All our wishes are fulfilled, and we tend to indulge ourselves in luxury, allowing our selfish desires to take the lead. Are we not over-consuming things that are not truly necessary? When we realize this, it becomes clear that the solution is to lead a simple life, stripped of all unnecessary trappings. Simplicity is the watchword of our new era. It is vital, too, for preserving the natural environment. Simplicity means the absence of frills, the reduction of waste. It means a life that is unadorned and plain. The Japanese word for simplicity, kanso, is written with two characters, one meaning consistent and uncomplicated, the other meaning integral and without waste. Thus, the simple life is one that retains the essentials, yet avoids wasteful excess. To attain simplicity, we must pinpoint what is necessary and rid ourselves of all that is not. This means clarifying the true meaning of life and living with that as our ultimate aim and ideal. Once we know what our goal is, it becomes obvious what we must do. Examine everything in your life in terms of its simplicity. Seek out the essentials, and you will discover the secret to a happy life. Simplicity for organizations. When a group of people launches a new business or any other undertaking, the entire group is energized and motivated. But it is not easy to maintain that high level of interest. To continue a tradition is to pass on its basic spirit to younger generations so as to generate new undertakings. The larger a group grows, however, the more complex its organization becomes, and the more difficult it is to maintain unity of purpose. Here, too, simplicity is key. Risshō Kōsei Kai is involved in numerous and diverse activities, from the basic day-to-day practice of our faith to projects that are directed to society in general, and to the achievement of world peace. All these activities spring from our desire to apply the Buddha's teachings in our daily lives. Everything we do is important. Still, when an activity is carried on for too long, it can become a matter of habit rather than an act of faith, and we can lose sight of its original purpose. I once said that we should return to the origins of Risshō Kōsei Kai and focus all our activities on disseminating our faith. Our Buddhist practice is aimed at revealing the truth and the Dharma to ourselves and those around us. At its core is our wish for the happiness of all humanity. Our goal is not to make a large organization still larger. We must never forget our original purpose. Each member of Risshō Kōsei Kai must keep this in mind as we pursue our many activities and work together to attain our goals. Only in this way will we evolve into an organization that can respond to the needs of our times, and one that will furnish the energy for all of us to enjoy worthwhile and fulfilling lives. Grasping the essence of faith. To lead a life of simplicity is our basic aim. To achieve this, we need to recognize the heart of the Buddha Dharma, the law of transience. Keeping that in mind, let us all reconsider the way in which we practice our faith, the way in which we live each day. Let us stop to think about what is truly important. Simplicity can help us see things in clearer light. Simplicity can make it possible to repeat again and again those acts that truly reflect our faith. At times, we have to be versatile and apply ourselves in many different ventures. It is equally important, however, that at times we are able to concentrate on just one thing at a time. We need to be able to focus our attention and devote ourselves with unwavering dedication. We must not hurry, but neither should we pause. Once a member said to me that he interpreted my definition of simplicity as the means of grasping the essence of our faith. That is a wonderful way to understand what I want to convey. Each of us may conceive of simplicity in a different way. My hope is that all of us will apply the concept to every aspect of our lives. For those of us of the Buddhist faith, simplicity is the essence of our religious belief. It is at the core of the Buddha's teaching.